see the exit.
Yes, sir. Hi guys, thank you so much for coming. As most of you know from Plebe Summer, my goal was always to be a doctor. And I came to the academy knowing that, even though along the way certain people were discouraging, for example, like my blue and gold officer and then people in my company and whatnot. So you guys heard a very small version of it. I've met with some of you offline, but I just wanted to talk a little bit more about why, now that you guys are at that point, why choosing a major is actually really important and how I think I went about it and the best way to do it. So we'll go to the first slide, sir. So I think the first question that you always need to ask yourself is, what do I want to do with my life? I know that sounds like such a silly thing. It's obvious that that's the first question. But there's something my mom always had me do whenever I had trouble making a decision, and she asked me these 4 questions. So the first one is, how will this decision make me feel in 10 hours? So say you pick math, how is that going to make you feel in 10 hours? Probably...
Maybe a little held down, I chose something.
Yeah, you're like, great, I picked something, and you're going to be in King Hall for breakfast and like not care, right? But what about in 10 days? As plebes, probably nothing. It's going to be the same, right?
10 days is spring break.
10 days of spring break, so you probably really won't be thinking about it. But what about in 10 months? So now you're in a hard part of youngster year. What is that goal still the same goal that you had? How are you going to feel about your major then? And then what about in 4 years? It's really 10 years, but 4 years, really 3.5 for you guys when you're picking your service selection. How is your major going to make you feel when you're doing that? And then finally, 10 years. So these are just questions that I always have to ask myself whenever I'm making a big decision. I found it to be extremely helpful because something that matters in 10 hours probably won't matter in 10 years and then vice versa. So I'd argue that your major really matters differently to all types of people. And a lot of people here will tell you that your major has nothing to do with your service selection. Have you guys heard that rumor?
Yes.
Oh, it has nothing to do with your service selection. I think that's true, but up until a point, right? Because your major is what you're going to spend like the majority of your time doing, and everything you do in your major hopefully is like intellectually stimulating, and each major is going to stimulate something different within you and going to give you very different opportunities. So in a way, I think that it actually has a huge effect on your service selection, and I would say that if I, this is just me personally, of course, but if I went engineering, I don't think I would have landed on the medical track per se. You know, does that make sense? Like I wouldn't have done the same internships, I wouldn't have met the same advisors, standing right there, and I wouldn't have done the same things. So you have to start with what do I want? And I add this picture here. It's probably my favorite picture ever of myself. So I'm on the hospital ship. I'm off the coast of El Salvador in this picture. And I don't even know what surgery I was helping with, but I think it was some kind of general surgery. So we were doing something on this lady's stomach. And this is an academy grad. He's also a doctor. And he was like, hey, Megan, you can close. Do you guys know what that means?
Stitch them up.
I can stitch him up. So that like never happens, even to medical students. And so here I am. I learned how to throw some stitches, and they trusted me enough to close this person up. And so this is exactly what I've always wanted to do. And so starting there, like, what do I have to do to get to that point, right? But also I think something really important about picking a major is what will make me happy. So here at the academy, there's a lot of things that don't make you happy, like, at all, right? It's really hard. No one's going to deny that, and especially people like you guys who want to go med corps, like, you're going to make your life harder just by wanting to do that. So I think at a certain point, like, you want to look forward to your majors classes. They shouldn't be the classes that you're dreading. Does that make sense? So I think you just have to think about, like, you definitely want your major to be challenging, and anything in this department is going to challenge you, I promise. You can ask Professor Withers about my challenge of last semester. So you're always going to be challenged in anything you do. This one, sorry. So the next question is, will my major let me achieve my goals? And this is another picture from the hospital ship. So this boy, have you guys ever heard of Operation Smile? So basically, like, people pay for plastic surgery, like reconstructive plastic surgery for people all around the world. And what you don't know is, like, outside of America, there's a lot of really bad deformities on children that we get fixed like the day we're born. I'm not joking. So we would see a lot of these kids there, and so I had just helped in his surgery, and I was just hanging out with him. So again, this is something I want to do with my life, and will my major let me do that? So that's kind of the general major talk that I'm going to give you guys, and we can do questions later. But now I kind of want to talk more about why I chose math. So my plebe year, I came in, like I said, I want to be a doctor, but people are like, oh, like everyone who has good grades here is an engineer. Things have changed a little bit over the 4 years. So I was like, well, obviously I have to be a systems engineer, right? So second semester plebe year, I started in statics. Is anyone in statics in here? Okay, good. So my first class of statics was trig, and I was like, oh no, I do not, this is not the kind of math I wanted to do. So in high school, math had always like been my thing. I had done calculus, BC my senior year. I had great math teachers my whole life. And it was just something I really enjoyed doing. And then calculus and diffie-qs as a plebe. So I was kind of already on the math track, and I had a lot of really great advisors in math, and I realized like engineering was just probably not my thing. And so I came to this very brief, I specifically remember it, I stayed here until like 10 and talked to all the professors. And I actually started in ops research. And as you know, like there's a lot of math majors, but it's all the same department. So I started in ops research. Unfortunately, I had to take a lot of extra chemistry classes for medical school, and so it didn't really end up working out, which was fine. And I ended in a math major, and I truly enjoyed it, just because going back to my goals thing, like not only do I have academic goals and medical goals and things like that, but there's things I wanted to do at the academy, right? And part of that was like what I did with you guys. So my leadership experiences are something I wanted to do. And I think certain majors allow flexibility because they understand, certain departments understand better, like that you want to do things outside of school, and your major is going to be complementary to that rather than not let you do it at all. And I think, broadly speaking, the math major is the #1 major to do that, hands down, especially for medical. And Professor Withers can help me with like some more academic references, but most of my classes that I took for chemistry fit very well into my math matrix, and so I kind of got to tailor my academic experience to what I wanted it to be, into a major that doesn't really exist on the yard, and I honestly could not be happier. Everything I've ever wanted basically happened, which is crazy, but so that's kind of the major stuff. Can you click again, sorry? So I kind of started talking about my math experience. So last semester I had this really hard class called Real Analysis 1 with Professor Withers. And does anyone know what real analysis is? It's like pure math. How would you explain it, sir?
It's the real numbers, right?
Yeah, it's like basically what are
Taking the real
numbers.
numbers
That's how I
apart
explain
and
it, but he'll explain it differently.
Looking at it very carefully. And it's some of the same stuff you do in calculus, except you get it 10 times as close to that.
Right. So needless to say, it was challenging, and last semester I was applying for medical school and interviewing, and it was an exhausting time, so I took this picture right when I walked out of his final, and I was finally done with this semester. So I think it's like a perfect representation of my experience here. It's been extremely challenging. I've worked very hard for what I've done, and don't let anyone ever tell you that like you got something easily, because I don't think that's possible at this school. So that's just kind of my general math information. So I want to talk about internships next, if you can click, sir. So something absolutely wonderful about being a math major is you can basically walk, in my opinion, you can walk into any internship and be prepared to work and be well prepared to understand the material, if that makes sense. So this is at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. You guys ever heard of the national laboratories? Yeah, so you have like Los Alamos, which is in New Mexico, and then Los Alamos Labs, which are in San Francisco. So after my plebe year, I applied for this internship and got it, shockingly. And I showed up, and I was working on satellites. Now, how many of you think I knew anything about satellites? Like, no, I had no idea, nothing, right? But because of my experience in the math major, because of my experience with calculus, and you don't always have to necessarily be an expert on a topic to be able to be given material about it and understand it because of your math background. And I would say like that is by far the most important thing I've gained from this major, is having this broad experience in reasoning, this broad experience in math, to be given a project like I was given with the satellite. And like, was I great at it at first? Absolutely not. But I knew how to code, I knew how to read equations, and I generally knew how to approach a problem. And I think that that is exactly what the math major does for you. So I worked on a satellite that internship, and then I actually returned to the same group the next summer, and I worked on actual coding for the satellite. So I ended up presenting that to one of the astronauts. And again, I never coded in that language before, but because I had this experience in MATLAB and all this other stuff, it was easy for me to pick up. Does that kind of make sense? So it was a broad background that allowed me to apply to many different things. And then I did a medical internship with a CT scanner and TBI stuff. Do you guys know what TBIs are? Traumatic brain injuries. Again, no clue how to use this machine, no clue what it meant, but I could look up the information and I could understand it because of my math major. And I will tell you that medical schools like that, because in my internships it's come up, in my interviews it's come up, just things like that, because it's something different. And we can talk about chemistry a little bit more. I don't want to bash that major, but I think for me, going back to the original thing I told you guys, what was going to make me happy was still having this aspect and kind of forming my own experience here. And I did not think the chemistry major was the way for me to do that. So, and I honestly do not think I would have had a satellite internship had I done that stuff. Because I know even for my internship at Walter Reed, they were looking for a math major with a chemistry background. There was only one of them at that time, which was me. So it allowed me to go into these very niche internships. And then another thing about internships that I think after 4 years I've come to understand is that these two professors can tell you that a month of research is like literally nothing, right? You're not going to publish a paper, you're not going to accomplish a crazy amount of things, and that in reality, like we have a month, right? Like our professional training is a month. You guys haven't really gone through that, but that's how long it is, unfortunately. But I think the thing that was really important to me about internships is that I was surrounded by people that were insanely smart, and in a way that can only be achieved at this level, right? Like they have triple PhDs working on top secret research for the government. Like you don't find that many places. And so I saw these people and I was able to work with them and see how they thought and see what they did. And I began to realize that, you know, a lot of us here are capable of that very same thing. We just have to work hard to get there. And I think that was my first realization that maybe I could apply and potentially receive some of these international scholarships and things like that, that I think we can be very competitive for here. But without that perspective, I don't think I necessarily would have thought that. Does that make sense? Okay. And then next one, sir. So this is myself with my youngster, and then that's the day we got our service selection. So more specifically speaking, kind of like on the math side of things, I know a lot of you have questions because I've been approached by some of you about pure math versus applied math, which I will tell you I did pure because of the way it worked out with the math, with my chemistry classes. And for me, that's been really important for the reasoning side of things, and that probably doesn't make sense to most of you yet because you haven't taken a pure math class. But the way it teaches you to think, I've found to be very helpful in my chemistry classes, of all things. The way you look at organic molecules and the way that experiments work and things like that, oddly, are very closely related to some of these pure math principles. It's kind of hard to explain, but I've just found that that way of thinking has been really helpful for me in these other areas that I've had to work in. And then coding. So that's probably something that's also not on your mind right now, but a lot of people at this school don't know how to code, and I've seen that that's actually a really important tool to be able to use. For example, this summer I'm trying to do an internship at the dive school down in Panama City, where they are doing like medical experiments on seals and things like that they like keep underwater for like, I don't know, days or something. And he's like, well, I code in MATLAB, can you do that? And I'm like, absolutely, right? So that's a doctor that's coding in MATLAB. So you need to be able to have these skills, and with math, you definitely will practice that a lot. And the last thing is research and mentorship. So Professor Withers was my research advisor, and I will tell you that having a one-on-one math class is a lot harder than having a class because you can't hide, right? Like you're sitting there. If I didn't know something, he definitely knew when I didn't. And being able to perform research with him and with any of your advisors here in the math department, I think was a huge asset to me. And just, again, like having to push the bounds of thought, because people here can skate by. We all know that for a fact. Like you can find a major and you can write your capstone paper and you can graduate from the school without ever having been super intellectually challenged. And so I think, I hope you can tell I can't speak highly enough of this major because I've been able to do exactly what I wanted to do, and get into medical school and be happy and be successful. So I think that might be my last slide. And it all paid off. So that's me standing in front of UC San Diego Medical School, which is maybe where I'm going to go. We'll see. So that's all I have of just prepared comments, but I figured that we would have time for questions and stuff if you guys have some. More like specific or general, I'm not really sure. Yeah.
So from your friends who are also med course selects, what other majors worked out well besides math? I've heard of a few, but I don't know.
I would say math, actually, honestly. In the past, math majors have gone to the best medical schools. That's actually a fact. Just because I think we gain so much more, we have to think in a different way. Chemistry obviously worked out well. There are like 12 of them are chemistry majors. I have a friend who's a political science major. She got into Stanford last week. And then one guy is an engineer, and one girl is a history major. But the guy that's an engineer is struggling because MCAT timing was weird with his major. And something else I didn't mention was like, I took all of the classes I needed for medical school by the end of my youngster year, and I took the MCAT at the end of my youngster year. So it's pretty unusual, but it worked with my matrix. It worked with the math matrix, and I think that really set me up for success, because the last thing you want to be doing is worrying about your MCAT. And it's nice too, because at this school, like, you have to take chemistry, like basic chemistry and basic physics and basic amounts of math for medical school to begin with. And a lot of medical schools now actually are requiring like statistics courses and things like that, because it's becoming so much more important in medicine now to have like a basic background in math and this coding and stuff, because a lot of research has to do with it. So that was already all worked into my matrix. So I really only had to take organic chemistry and biology. And I loved both of those classes, so it wasn't like a hassle or anything. Yeah.
Do you think your combination of math and sort of chemistry combined together into medical school sort of made you stand out as a Rhodes Scholar applicant? And also just, your experience.
For the Rhodes or for medical school?
For Rhodes. And also just your experience in terms of applying for that scholarship.
So I applied to 20 medical schools before I applied to Rhodes. So that's like a whole different.
You might tell a little bit about the Rhodes School.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk a little bit about that.
That's a whole thing in itself.
That's like a whole 2-3 hour presentation alone. I think, yeah, it absolutely did, just because it proved that not only could I be successful in the chemistry and biology side of things, which, by the way, everyone going into medical school is successful in that. Like, literally everyone is perfect in those areas, right? Because if not, then you probably shouldn't be a doctor. But it also showed that I was capable in this other area that is becoming so increasingly important. And then also for Rhodes, like, I think it really helped me stand out, because again, it showed I can stretch myself in different areas. So I applied for social policy degrees, but those social policy degrees require a background in mathematics, because everything has to do with this coding and this statistic basis. So I think it just showed that I had a breadth of experience rather than just like super narrow down one track. If you're interested in the Marshall Scholarship, that's much more, you're really good at one thing. And I would not say I'm really good at one thing, but I would say that I can apply my background to a wide variety of things, as demonstrated with my math background with chemistry and stuff like that. That kind of makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. Rhodes is a whole other thing. We can talk about that at a different time, but unless you guys have questions about that right now, but probably should not be something you're worrying about at this moment, please. Yeah.
So with they're changing the MCAT, I know that, and so Professor Kinter said that they're talking about like biochemistry and psychology and all these other
Yeah.
classes that, would you say as a math major that helps you, like, well, okay, with this new test, if you know anything about it?
Yeah, so I did not take the new test. I did take the old test, which was beneficial for me because none of the medical schools understand the new test. No one's taken it yet, so it's really hard to understand those scores. I studied abroad, so that kind of messed up my matrix a little bit. But if I was here at the academy, I could have definitely taken psychology. I did have to fit biochemistry into my first year. So, medical schools change with the current social system, right? So psychology is becoming a lot more important, and so is biochemistry. Like I said, a lot more medical schools are requiring statistics and math. So it's always going to be fluid and changing, but that would have fit into my matrix even better if I didn't go abroad, which will be very challenging to go abroad in any major trying to go med corps, just by the way. I was lucky, I had a lot of validations, so that kind of cleared it up. But if I didn't have those validations, I still would have been able to do all these things. I just probably wouldn't have gone abroad. And maybe taken some summer school, which isn't a big deal at all. So you can take biology over summer school, which is really nice. Any other questions? You guys have to have like a million. Yeah.
With the MedCorps selects, after graduating from med school and going in to the actual MedCorps community, are there a lot of different options other than kind of a traditional doctor role? Are there a lot of options for going into research in the MedCorps?
That's a good question. I would say just like we leave here and they just spend a ton of money on us and they need us to be line officers, it's kind of the same thing for becoming a doctor.
Okay.
So they need you to be a clinician. Research will happen, just like you have to research in any academic field to achieve a certain level of, I'm not even sure what you would call it, but I would say if you're going med corps, it should be to be a doctor, not to be a researcher. Because a lot of people do go to medical school to be researchers, but that probably won't work out for you in the military. But don't quote me on that. I mean, I don't know. I'm just a senior at the Naval Academy. Yeah.
Do you recall, what you did each block over summer?
Yeah, sure. So after my plebe year, I went to Lawrence Livermore, did a math internship, and then I did my plebe cruise, or my youngster cruise, I'm sorry. That was out of Australia. But it was winter, so it wasn't actually that great, because it was really rocky. I was sick the whole time. And then after my youngster year, I went back to that same math internship that I was doing, which, as I said, has just been absolutely incredible. And then I went to Walter Reed, and then I did ProTramed. So that was all in one summer. So I haven't taken a lot of leave, and a lot of people that go med corps usually don't, because you need to take on these extra clinical experiences or these extra internships that are going to help you stand out much more. And again, I'm trying to sell you the math major for a reason. I got to do this stuff because I was a math major, not because I was going medical. Like how I said, they specifically asked for someone with a math background, which gave me this cool internship that no one else had the opportunity to do. And then last summer, I was on the hospital ship, did plebe summer, and my leave I spent applying to medical school, so that was all I did. Yeah.
Sorry, this is kind of a random question. So for the summer, would you recommend that we take one of the prereqs now, or would you say taking biology would be better? I heard navigation.
That would be more of a question. I think that's more of a personal preference.
Okay.
I never took summer school,
Mm-hmm.
but I definitely think during the AC year, those nav classes kind of get in the way of the focus of your really hard math classes and chemistry classes, and are more of a headache. But I think that's definitely up to your personal preference. I'm not sure either way, honestly. Yeah.
For Lawrence Livermore, would you say that doing an internship where you can actually make an impact matters? I mean, obviously we're freshmen, so they might, not gonna give you a lot of, I guess, research work, like real research work, but,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of difficult to find what internship would be really right,
Yeah.
because there are some internships where they just like want you to code a website, and then there's some that maybe like you're not like the general area you're not interested in, but you might be able to do more. So like, what's important?
Yeah, I think. So I would say like I was never extremely interested in like working to build a satellite. But what I was interested in doing was applying my math background, right? And that allowed me to do that in a way that I'll probably never do ever again. But as I hope you can tell from my presentation, I gained so much more than like the research I actually did. Does that make sense? Because a month anywhere is not going to be a big deal. A lot of these institutions want you to come there because ultimately, a lot of their leadership is actually old, like prior military. So at the lab, for example, like a lot of the high up people were accounting grads. So they want you to come there because potentially future in your career, you're going to be working there again, or it's just all about that exposure, I would say. So don't be so focused on like, is this going to make an impact? But what, like a analytical like research result, right? You're probably not going to get that by the end of the internship.
Right.
But there are a lot of other things you can gain from it. So
more like networking is what you're saying?
yeah, and I think it's more than networking. It's just growth as a person outside of the classroom. Because in a classroom, like you can basically do what you're told, right, and work really hard. But in a research environment, like it's so new and everything's coming at you from different places, and you have to work with new people and stuff like that. So
I think you can learn things by doing something like that.
yeah,
Not learn in the classroom.
right.
Okay? This is not the real world here.
Yeah.
When's selection for the hospitalship cruise work?
Oh. I think it ends up having to do with grades and stuff, I'm sure. And you know, activities that you've done as a mid. That's how everything gets picked here. Yeah. Any other like math related questions? Yeah.
Can you talk about the difference between the honors program and the regular program now?
Sure. So I started out as honors. Again, I went abroad, so a lot of things got kind of messed up. So as an honors major, you will do the one-on-one reading course, which is what I did with Professor Withers, and then you'll write a research paper, which is also what I did with Professor Withers. And then you take Real Analysis 1 and 2. So I believe normal math majors take a version of Real Analysis 1, so
Yeah, it's less like it now than it used to be, and it's only one semester.
and it's only one semester. So as a pure math major, you take 2 semesters. So I took the first semester, did the research, did the reading class. I was given brigade ops, which was such a blessing, and I had absolutely no time. And so I think another thing here that you guys have to realize, you're not asking for this advice, but I'm going to give it to you, is you do have to determine what's going to be reasonable for you. So something that happened to me last minute was that all of a sudden some schools were requiring biochemistry. Like my senior year, all of a sudden every school was requiring biochemistry, and it was something I hadn't planned into my matrix. And so I had to take it, and it kind of messed up some credits. But I did a lot of the honors matrix. I just didn't take Real Analysis 2. Which is obviously going to be a really hard class. I just didn't have time for it, but that's kind of the difference. And I would recommend the honors program absolutely. Just make sure you're looking at every single medical school, because a lot of them now are going to require biochemistry. And again, very feasible. I just went abroad and had 1 class that transferred back. So I had 3 credits transfer back for 1 semester.
Most people who do honors take Real Analysis second class year.
Yes,
not
right.
first class.
And so that was, you know, first class years is challenging, especially if you have a billet, because people can pull you. Like I will tell you, yesterday I was pulled for like 3.5 hours. That was not planned into my day to go do something like that, right? So it's just a little bit more unpredictable. So if I had done it my second class year, I think it would have been absolutely fine. Any other questions? None? All right, well that's my presentation. Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys got something out of it. And I'll just wait for more questions if you guys have any.